week 7, so we're getting near the end of English 101 and we graduate up a level. So before we get into this week's topic, what we're going to do is have a look at the homework. So I'm just going to take one of the sentences that we looked at last week that I gave you, and the sentence was, the dog ate the food. Now the idea of this sentence was, as we were talking about last week about descriptive nouns, is that dog doesn't give us a huge amount of information about what it is that you're seeing, the image that you're seeing in your head. It's just a very generic word, it's very neutral, it doesn't describe what the dog looks like in any way. Likewise, the word food doesn't really give us a lot of information. It's just stating kind of in a very general way what it is that you're talking about, but it doesn't give us any description about what kind of food. And remember, when we're thinking about language, what you're thinking about is communication of ideas, communicating images or pictures that you have in your own head, ideas that you want to communicate to someone else. So it's really very important, if you have a specific idea of a dog and food in your head, you want that idea to travel. You want to be successful in getting that picture across to somebody else. Just one of the answers that I got in. So Jeffrey sent this in, thank you Jeffrey, and his sentence was really lovely, which is why I wanted to include it. And the sentence is, the Yorkshire Terrier ate the banana. Now, immediately you can see the difference between those two sentences, and you should be able to imagine in your head these sentences look different. As soon as we look at Jeffrey's sentence, what you should imagine, whatever image of a dog you had before, it should be morphing, it should be changing into a little Yorkshire Terrier. And again, the food, it's not a big food of dog food anymore, it is a banana. So Jeffrey's being very specific about the nouns that he's picked, which means that the image that he has in his head, the idea that he had for this sentence, is communicated to us very successfully. And that's really what we were trying to do with this idea of descriptive or strong nouns. Okay, so an important kind of idea. Now the other question that I was asked, one of the sentences that I showed you last week was this one, which was, the toy poodle yipped. And again, this was another example of a very descriptive sentence, very specific type of dog, doing a very specific type of noise, okay, not just barking, it's giving us a very high-pitched sort of yip. Now the question that was sent in was basically, I had put on the board that you could use yipped, or you could also say the toy poodle was yipping, and somebody wanted to know the difference between these two, which is a really actually good question. And it goes back to the verb. Now remember, way back, I think in week 1, we talked about the verb as the heart of your sentence, and it carries a huge amount of information in English. And one of the things that it carries is time, which we looked about. We moved our verbs into the past. And another thing it does is it reflects a person, and we also saw this in the present. When you're talking about he, she, or it, you'll add an S. And the last thing that we can say in English 101 at least, is the other thing it does is it reflects how something is happening. And what exactly does that mean? So in order to explain this, first of all, I'm just going to draw a timeline. Okay. So timeline basically moves us from the past, which is here. We'll say that this is the present, so this is now. And that arrow, of course, is taking us into the future. Now we can sit, any verb that you use, ever, is going to sit somewhere on this line, because verbs tell us about time, okay, as we've said. But how they sit on the line will change. So if we look at the first sentence that we have now, the toy poodle yipped. Now you can see the ED, and we talked about these type of verbs a few weeks ago. ED into the past, what we're looking at is the past simple. It's a past tense, but it's something called the past simple. And it's simple. We add, for most verbs, ED. We have those irregular ones that we already spoke about which change, but for the purposes of this, we're just going to be thinking about the ED one, and it sits here in the past simple. So we're going to have yipped there. Now the shape of this X is extremely important. Yipped is the past simple, and what the past simple does is it expresses a completed action in the past. Something which is completely over, and which very often can happen just like that, okay? A snap or a single thing happening in the past. Now, it's not always used like that, but that's the easiest way to think of it for now. So if I say the toy poodle yipped, that could mean that it just gave one yip, yip, and it finished. We're not sure. It could have been more than that, but we're not sure. So the toy poodle yipped is a completed action in the past, and it looks like that. Okay, it looks like an X. Now, let's think about the other example sentence that we have that I said you could also use to talk about the past, which is the toy poodle was yipping. Now, have a think, and possibly in your head you might get a sense of why this sentence is different. There's a different feel about it. It's still the past, but as you can see, it looks different. The ed has gone. What we've got on the end of the verb yip now is an ing. And what we also have is the word was, which is the past of the verb to be. And the two of those together are going to make something different. So let me just get rid of my past simple here. And if we're going to be using was yipping, now was yipping is going to look like this, okay? So we'll put this little so we don't get confused. And this is a past tense, but it's called the past continuous, okay? Continuous. So it's still in the past, but this time it's doing something a little bit different. You can see by its shape, it's kind of rolling along there in the past. So it's not an X, it doesn't sit like this in my timeline, it's moving in some way. And if we think about the toy poodle was yipping, the image that I have is that it doesn't just do it once, it keeps going. Okay? It keeps going in the background. So maybe it's your neighbour's dog and for an hour you've been sitting trying to watch Netflix and all that time you can hear yip, 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 yip in the background. So was yipping is something that happens over a length of time, and that's why it looks different on the timeline and how the way that you use it, how the way that you build it in that sentence also looks a little bit different. So very often if we're moving into the past, once you've made that decision to move into the past, you then need to have a think about what past are you moving into. Is it going to be the past continuous, which is going to look like this and your curly line, or is it going to be the past simple? So is it something that's completed or something that happened once, for example? So there are kind of considerations to make there as well. Now what I'm going to do at the end of this video is I'm going to put up some sentences, and what I'd like you to do is to have a think about whether you should put them into the past simple, so it's going to look like that, or if you should put them into the past continuous, and maybe also have a think about if you change between those two, what's the difference? So is there a difference in meaning between, in this case, between yipped and was yipping? We can say yes, there's a bit of a difference. So to have a look at those sentences and see what you can do with them. Now you can see in this one's a little bit trickier to build. We're just going to use he, she or it, just to make it a little bit simpler. So we're going to stick with this word was, and we'll talk about other people and having it look a little bit different next week. But basically for this week we'll just stick with the was. So all you need to worry about is sticking an ing on the end of your verb if you want to use the past continuous. Okay. So just to recap, past simple looks like an X and is a completed action in the past. That's where you've got your ed or your irregulars. Past continuous is kind of a rolling action in the past for different reasons, but we're not worried too much about that. But it can mean that something is continuing, that something is going on, doesn't just happen once. So it's kind of more about over time. Okay. So I will see you next week. We're going to talk a little bit more about this idea and also having a look at what happens when we move continuous into the present, because that is also possible. Continuous moves all the way along our timeline. And that is basically going to finish us up on English 101. But we'll talk about that next week, and then we can kind of graduate to the next class. Okay, see you then. Have a good week. Bye.